We're only expanding on the beginning of the story. So it's better to get all the middle actions down, then come back and say, how could we make the beginning even better? Could we add dialogue? Could we add a thought? Could we add an action? So in this case, we added dialogue and then we added an action. What was my body doing to show I was excited? Let's go back and practice, orally rehearse the beginning of the story. Ready? One Saturday night at my house, I grabbed my sleeping bag and gear and headed to my friend's house for a sleepover party. I shouted to my parents, "I'm going to stay up all night." How could I begin this next sentence? I could just say, my heart started to thump like a drum and my body shook all over with excitement. I could do that. I could begin with an emotion word. Excited and filled with joy. My heart started to thump like a drum and my body started to shake all over. Let's do that. Let's begin with emotion words. Excited and joyful. Excited and joyful, comma. My heart started to thump like a drum and I shook all over with delight. So notice I'm going back and forth, planning my sentences, orally rehearsing. I have my actions, my ideas, and as I plan the sentences, how I'm going to write them, I then will add my starter phrases, my transitions, or just a key word to start that sentence. We have our beginning. Let's go to the middle. Again, repeat the beginning. Last Saturday night at my house, I grabbed my sleeping bag and gear and headed to my friend's house for a sleepover party. I shouted to my parents, "I'm going to stay up all night if I can." Excited and joyful, my heart started to thump like a drum and my body shook all over with delight. Let's go to the middle. Who's doing the action here? I am. What did I do? I raced down the street to my friend's house. I don't need a transition here. Maybe I could say quickly, I raced down the street to my friend's house, or I raced down the street to my friend's house. Maybe this time we'll put quickly. So again, I write the word quickly and I have the picture there to form my sentence. Quickly, I raced down the street to my friend's house. Let's go to the next action. Who's doing the action? I am. What did I do? I knocked on the door and waited a long time before someone answered. So there was my who's doing the action? I was. And what did I do? I knocked on the door and had to wait before someone answered. Maybe I could start with when I arrived, I knocked on the door. Or I could just say, I knocked on the door. Let's start with the word when. When I arrived. Ready? Go back to the beginning. Last Saturday night at my house, I grabbed my sleeping bag and gear so I could go to a sleepover party at my friend's house. I shouted to my parents, "I'm going to stay up all night if I can." Excited and joyful, my heart started to thump like a drum and my body shook all over. Quickly, I raced down the street to my friend's house. When I arrived, I knocked on the door and had to wait a long time before someone finally answered. My friend's mom said, "Today's not the party, it's next week." I'm going to go to number 4. Who's doing the action? I could just say, I started to cry, or tears fell from my face, crocodile tears fell from my face when I realized I had the wrong day. Or I could just say, I started crying, or I started bawling my head off. Ooh, that's a good one. Let's look at number 4. Who's doing the action? I am. What did I do? I started to cry because I got the day wrong. I started to cry because I was embarrassed that I was standing there with all of my gear and I was wrong about the party day. That sounds okay. Let's say it again. I started to bawl my head off like a little baby. Ooh, that's a good one. I started to bawl my head off and crocodile tears came down my face. That's even better. Let's use that one. Should we start with a word, a starter word, or just the word I? Let's just start with I. So notice I don't always need to have a transition. I started to cry so much it looked like crocodile tears were coming down my face. Perfect. I cried. Ooh, I said cried in the previous sentence. So let's go back. Instead of I cried so much, maybe I bawled my head off and it looked like crocodile tears were coming down my face. Even better, woo, woo, woo. Remember, we don't want the redundant police to come and arrest us. If I say cried, 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 that doesn't sound good. So we'll choose different words. And again, that's why we orally rehearse all these, so that we can catch that. I cried. I got the date of the party wrong. Let's go back and practice the whole thing again. Last Saturday night at my house, I grabbed my sleeping bag and gear and headed off to my friend's house for a sleepover party. I shouted to my parents, I'm going to stay up all night if I can. Excited and joyful, my heart started to thump like a drum and my body shook all over. Quickly, I raced down the street to my friend's house. When I arrived, I knocked on the door and had to wait until somebody finally answered. My mom's friend looked at me and said, "Today's not the party, it's next week." I bawled my head off and crocodile tears started to come down my face. I cried, I got the date of the party wrong. Who's doing the action? My dad. What did he do? He came up with an idea to change my mood, to help me with my problem. How could I start this sentence? I could begin this sentence with my dad came up with an idea, but I think we need a transition, and that transition should let the reader know that I'm back at home. So how about back at home or at home? Let's use at home. They know I'm at home. My dad came up with an idea so he could solve my problem. My dad came up with an idea to help change my sad mood. It's great. We have our beginning, we have our middle. Let's go to the end of the story. Who's doing the action? My dad and I. What are we doing? We're sleeping in the backyard in a tent. We're having a camp out in the backyard in a tent. When did this happen? I need to transition to this ending. Later that night. Let's put later that night. Wow. And I'm just going to draw a moon. I don't even need to write the word night. Later that night, my dad and I had a camp out in the backyard. I'm going to draw a line here because I don't need to go all the way to the end of the story yet. I think we should have one more line. So let's draw a line here. We're going to expand on this ending before we get to the reflection at the end. Should I have a thought, an action, or should I say something? Let's have an action. What did we do during the camp out? Maybe we told stories, scary stories, and funny jokes. I'll put a line here. Do you see how I just put keywords? You could draw a picture or you could have keywords. Later that night, we camped out in the backyard. Who told stories and funny jokes? My dad. When did he do it? Maybe I could say just my dad told me funny stories and silly jokes. I could begin the sentence with when. All night long. Or all night. My dad told funny stories and silly jokes. Excellent ending. Our last step in planning all the parts of our story on our organizer is step 8, reflection. And reflection is when you, the writer, go back and you look at all the things that happened to you in this story and you reflect on it. When you reflect on this story, you, the writer, are telling the reader how this experience made you feel, what it made you think, what it made you realize, discover, learn, wish. You can go in many different directions in a reflection. Let's write our reflection. And luckily, we have a secret formula to write a reflection, and that is TCR. The T is for transition. And these transitions are special transitions that we use in order to end the story with a reflection. So these transitions could be things like, in the end, After that day, from that time on, looking back, forever after, you may list out a bunch of different transitions so that the students can choose from them, or they can come up with their own. I find that when you list many different transitions for the reflections, that's very helpful to the students. You can always add more. They can come up with their own as well. Let's say that we chose forever after. So we're going to write forever after. I chose forever after. That does not mean the students need to choose that one. They can choose whichever transition they like. We have forever after on mine, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at this and say forever after is my transition. C is for character. Who is this story all about? Myself. So what word do I need to write? I. R is for reflection. I need to decide. Looking back on this story, I'm going to have a reflection. Am I going to tell the reader how I felt, what I wished, what I learned, discovered? I need to decide which one. So when I do this with the kids, I always try to give them many different ideas. And then from there, they usually come up with their own. For example, I may say something like, forever after, I'm going to tell you what I learned. Forever after, I learned I should write down a sleepover on the calendar so I never forget the day. Or I could have wish. Forever after, I wished that I could always have campouts with my dad in the backyard. Maybe I could tell my audience what I felt. Forever after, I felt lucky to have such a wonderful dad. Once I decide my reflection, I'm going to put my keyword. I'm going to tell my reader what I felt. And then I'm going to just put the word lucky there. And I can finish up the sentence when I orally rehearse it. I have my entire organizer filled out. We started this entire activity with a blank piece of paper. We looked at the beginning, middle, and end. And first we started with the beginning, just filling out SC arrow. If you had done the movie scripts with your children in the introductory activities, this SC arrow would have been a breeze. They would have already known how to fill it out. That's why the introductory activities are so crucial to start right at the beginning of the school year. Once we labeled our SC arrow with what the beginning of the story was, we jumped to the end and just drew a picture of the ending part of the story where we were camping out with our dad. We walked through the steps in order to fill out our organizer. We have all of our ideas on our paper. Now let's add some fancy words. This is when you go back to your whole paper and ask, are there any places where I need to add adjectives? Do I need to describe anything vividly in these sentences? We'll go back to the beginning of our story. One night at my house, I grabbed my sleeping bag and gear, then ran off to my friend's birthday party. I'm going to look at this sentence and say, is there anything in this sentence that is important for my reader to vividly see, smell, hear, taste, feel? Is there anything there? Maybe the sleeping bag. Why don't I say, I grabbed my big, cushy sleeping bag? So I'm going to write the word big, comma, cushy. In order to get those words, all I have to say is the phrase, what kind of sleeping bag would I grab if I was going on a campout? Would I grab an old sneaky one? No. A big cushy one? Yes. I have the adjectives in that sentence. I'll go to the next sentence. Each one of these are a sentence. I shouted to my parents, I'm going to stay up all night. I don't need to add anything there. Excited and joyful, my heart started to thump like a drum and my body shook with glee. I think I have everything I need there. Quickly, I raced down the street to my friend's house. I think I'm fine there. When I arrived, I knocked on the door and had to wait for what seemed like an eternity. Oh, maybe I'll put that word there to describe how long the wait was. My friend's mom said, today's not the party, it's next week. I'm fine with that. I bawled my eyes out in a river of tears. I think I'm going to write the word river there. Instead of saying cried, I replaced it with bawled, and I'm going to add a little bit more description by using figurative language, I'll say a river of tears. I bawled my eyes out like a river of tears. Notice I'm just putting keywords there to remind me when I'm orally rehearsing this. Next sentence, I cried. I got the date of the party wrong. At home, my dad had an idea. What kind of idea did my dad have? A great idea, a unique idea, a wonderful idea, a clever idea. Let's use clever. And then I'm going to write clever. So notice I'm brainstorming, I'm saying my sentence, I'm adding these descriptive words in as I go back and review. Let's go to the end of our story. Later that night, my dad and I had a camp out in the backyard. I could just keep it like that. All night long, my dad told stories. What kind of stories? Scary stories. And jokes. What kind of jokes? Funny jokes. It sounds like so much fun to be a part of that camp out. The last sentence of our story is the reflection. Forever after, I felt lucky to have such a great dad. I have all my ideas recorded. I have my fancy words recorded. The last piece is punctuation time. This is so critical. We are now going to identify using a red pen. All your students can take out a red pen, pencil, or crayon. It really doesn't matter. But what we want them to do is we want them to now write the first word or first letter of each sentence with a capital, with the red. And we also want them to put all the punctuation, commas, periods, quotation marks in red. This way, when they're writing, that pops out at them and they planned all of that work on their organizer. Nothing worse than children writing everything out. They forget to put their capitals, periods, punctuation, commas, and then have to go back to their writing and explain where those go. It's beyond them. It's much easier to plan that on the organizer because each one of these parts of the organizer, this box, this box, this box, each one of these numbers in the middle, the boxes at the end, are their own sentences. They can see that visually. They go together. We'll walk through and we'll say the story and we'll add our punctuation. So we have one night. What word am I starting off with? One. Let's write the word one and put a few lines underneath the O to remind ourselves to capitalize it. One night at my house. I'm going to put a comma because what do I need when I have a when and where at the beginning of a sentence? What do I need to put after it? Comma. I grabbed my big comfy, let's put a comma there, sleeping bag and gear, then went over to my friend's house. I grabbed my big one night at my house. I grabbed my big comfy sleeping bag and went to my friend's party. Period. I shouted. What word did I start with? I shouted to my parents, comma. Now we have our quotation mark. I'm going to stay up all night. Exclamation point, quotation mark. Excited and joyful, comma, there's my transition, and those feeling words need a comma after them. Excited and joyful, my heart started to beat like a drum and my body shook with joy. Period. Quickly, I need to start with a capital. I'll put my Q with a capital and a comma after that transition. I raced down the street to my friend's house. Period. When I arrived, that's my phrase, my transition phrase at the beginning, and it's telling me the time when I arrived. So I'm going to put a comma after there. I knocked on the door for what seemed like an eternity. Period. Let's put a W on when I arrived, a comma after, and a period at the end. My mom's friend said, so now I have my capital. I'm going to put the apostrophe S there so I don't forget that because that's difficult sometimes to remember as you're writing. My friend's mom said, comma, quotation mark, 2 days, not the party. It's next week. So I'm putting all my punctuation in place. I bawled my eyes out so hard it looked like a river was running down my face. Period. I cried, comma. Here's your quotation marks. Ooh, look what I just did. I need to have those capitals at the beginning of each sentence in my dialogue. I got the date of the party wrong. At home. Later that night. Ooh, you know, I noticed that I have night in the next sentence. I'm going to say later that evening, comma, my dad and I were camping out in the backyard, period. All night, comma, my dad told scary stories and funny jokes, period. Forever after, comma, I felt lucky to have such a wonderful dad, period. All my quotation marks, my periods, my capitals, anything that I need in order to tell the reader how to read these sentences, because that's why we have punctuation and why we have capitalization, in order to have sentence boundaries and also to tell the reader how to read these sentences, are marked on my organizer. Again, this is a much easier method for children to put their capitals, periods, endings of their sentences, quotation marks on their organizer. So when they go to write, all that planning has been done ahead of time. We have all of our ideas. We have all the punctuation, capitalization on our paper. At this stage, this could be, when you're writing at this level 5, a 1 or a 3 paragraph story. When you're looking at your story to decide if it's going to be a 1 or 3 paragraph story, you have to go back to each one of the columns, the beginning, the middle, and the end. If you have many sentences in each one of these columns, then you will want to separate each one of these parts of the story into paragraphs. In this case, I have a long beginning, a very long middle, and a long ending. So we will separate this story that we planned into 3 paragraphs. How will the children remember? Once you look at the beginning, middle, and end and see that you have many sentences for each one of those parts of the story, then you need to show the students that we need to identify these as paragraphs. And when they go to write, they need to have a signal, some sort of a signal to tell them, oop, indent. So we will draw a yellow line at the top of each one of those columns. That way, when they're reading their organizer, they'll remember to indent, write out their story. So here I have my beginning. Oop, I see the yellow line. I need to start by indenting. I practice orally saying my sentence, and then I start writing it. After I've written out my beginning, when I head to the middle to orally rehearse my story, I notice the yellow line. So again, I'm going to indent for that paragraph. This is a wonderful way for your students to just start seeing beginning paragraphing. Paragraphs are groups of sentences that go together about one unifying idea. We are not counting how many sentences are in a paragraph. We're looking at here's our beginning, here's our middle, here's our end. We paragraphed each part of the story so that we can separate out the beginning, middle, and end for the reader. All of our information is on the organizer. Everything from the ideas to it being organized correctly to all the sentences identified, all the mechanics and the paragraphing. Students at this point are going to orally rehearse their paper over and over again. I will walk around the room. When I hear that they can say the story with ease and they have control over the story, then I tell them that they can go ahead and start writing it down. As they write it down, it's critical that they keep saying their story and write. Keep saying their story and write. Although we may have paragraphing in our story, I want to also alert you that sometimes this organizer may just be 1 paragraph. In your manual on page 61, this organizer did not have paragraphing. And the reason why is because there were just a few sentences in the beginning, middle, and then a couple of sentences at the end. There were not enough to paragraph here. So in this case, we visually looked at the organizer and said, this will be 1 paragraph. All we did was indent the first sentence, and we wrote out the whole story as 1 paragraph. So remember, one of the last things you're going to do is look at each one of those columns and decide, are there enough sentences for us to break this up into paragraphs? This is critical for you to see this story in 2 different places. One, the one that we wrote together, had many sentences, so we paragraphed. This one, though, showed the same story, showed just a few sentences for the beginning, middle, and 2 at the end. So we decided that we didn't have enough and we could just put it all together as one paragraph. That's critical because at stage 5, you could have 1 or 3 paragraphs depending on the amount that you're writing. You don't want your students to stop talking, because then they won't use the organizer. They won't rehearse these sentences. It's through this rehearsal that they keep adding and changing their sentences and revise until it sounds really good, and then they go to write it down. If you have students stop talking, what they will do is ignore their organizer and from their head try to write out the story, and all this work will be for nothing. So it's critical that they orally rehearse, start writing. What I tell students is, say the whole story to yourself once, say it to your buddy once, say it to yourself again after all the planning. If you can say the beginning, middle, and end with ease and you have control, then you're ready to start writing. Go to the beginning of your story, practice the sentence. Now write it down, and when you write it, keep talking and saying it as you write, because it'll make your writing faster and it'll flow quickly. Go back, repeat what you just wrote, and then now practice the next sentence or maybe the next couple of sentences. Go to your paper, start writing it out again. This is a fabulous way for your students to have personal narratives that have sophisticated sentences that stay on topic, are sequenced, are meaningful, have paragraphing in place. There's so many elements here. We went down to word choice, we went down to transitions. There are all those different parts of writing that are critical for your students to become good writers embedded in this activity. We did this together. You may want to do 1 or 2 more of these stories together. If you have students who already understand the process, then have them go as buddies and write a story together while you keep the rest of the class with you. Eventually, you want to pair all your kids into partners by likability. And finally, have them write some on their own. The steps for you as the teacher, once they start writing their own story, is to metacognitively walk them through planning their organizer, reminding them, say your story, act it out, put the beginning down, identify the end, sequence the middle. You are going through and reminding them how to fill in their organizer. If they get stuck on orally rehearsing a sentence, if they can't come up with an idea, then you're there to model and give them some ideas. That's the end of Stage 5, Personal Narrative Writing. In this Stage 5, your students learn to write personal narratives that were cohesive, coherent, sequenced, made sense, were interesting, filled with transitions that were powerful, and also sophisticated words. We put all our punctuation and mechanics on these organizers. Everything is there for your students to write wonderful stories. Good luck, and I hope you enjoy it.